Welcome to WECAN, Celeste Warren. You're a global diversity and inclusion leader helping businesses build cultures of equity through your consulting firm, Celeste Warren. You co-founded a non-for-profit with your children called Destination STEM. You're the author of The Truth About Equity, which is demystifying equity, offering practical steps so everyone can act upon them and everybody wins. You're transforming good intentions into equitable results with your daily work, Celeste. Talk to us about your work and your mission.
Well, thank you first for the invitation, Stephanie, to have this conversation with you. It is something that is near and dear to my heart and about my purpose. I started this work a long time ago. Actually, someone might say as a child. My father was the first Black teacher and principal in our area. And I learned from him, watching firsthand, what working in a system that really wasn't created for him at that time, what it was like. And so I heard about his struggles, his obstacles, the barriers, and then also what he did about it. What were some of his strategies? And he was a very disciplined, a very in my world, he was my hero. And so I took those learnings, and it was just sort of ingrained in me as a child. And throughout my formative years, throughout my young adulthood and adulthood to today. And so for me, it's really, really important that people understand that the essence of diversity, equity, and inclusion is simply what I call Management 101, Leadership 101, and Business 101. It is something that is very, it's important that I make it so people understand it, pragmatic, actionable. And so it takes all of this, it tries to demystify it, if you were. That's kind of what I feel my calling is, and to help people to understand it and to make them understand that you're using it every day. It's not going to go away. It's something that is part of your management style, your leadership style, and how you connect with your customers.
Yeah. Celeste, and I always think it's a very big topic, and it's a really important topic. It's a topic that's taken a beating in the last year, and I feel that we need many more conversations to exactly demystify it so that everybody understands it is in the wheelhouse of everyone's possibilities to bring about change in equity. So talk to us about those practical steps. You wrote this book. Talk to us about your book, about the learnings that you want people to know. What are the practical steps that each one of us can do to create more equity in our lives, in our workplaces, and in the spaces we inhabit?
Yeah, I wrote the book in a time where I was transitioning in my life, and I retired last year as a chief diversity officer for 10 years at a major Fortune 100 company, global company. And there are so many things and so many questions that I would get from managers and leaders and employees that would say, well, I don't understand it. It seems like it's something that's going to slow down the business. It's going to slow down what I'm doing. I have to take all of these steps back, and I'm just here to make or sell or do this this work. So what I like to talk about is, there's basically kind of 6 steps. First, and this is that anybody can do at any level. First, you have to be aware of the system, be awareness. What is around? See what's happening around you. Pay attention. Look at what is happening in staff meetings, in town halls that your leaders have. What are they talking about? Look on on the website of your company. What does it project from the standpoint of inclusion? Look at some of the policies that exist within your company, the HR policies, your employee handbook. Does it include inclusive practices where all employees are going to benefit from it? that's, some of the things that you can do, but be aware of, look around you and find out what's going on. The second thing is access. You
Mm.
need to, once you're looking around you, then you need to try to remove the barriers. Remove those barriers that are getting in the way from everyone being able to experience the benefit of the product, the service, the policy, the practice that was created. And so removing those barriers means looking at those policies, practices, procedures, and saying, who is this leaving behind
Mm.
and why and what needs to be done? The third step is advocacy. These are all observations and then actions that you need to take, but you have to elevate your voice. And if you're not going to elevate it on behalf of yourself, elevate it on behalf of all of those people who have been disenfranchised, have been marginalized, have been left behind. But for whatever reason, they haven't found yet the power to elevate their own voices.
Mm.
So, especially if you're a manager, if you're a leader, if you're an individual leader and you're responsible for certain groups, then elevate your voice to talk about what you've seen and then talk about some of the barriers that are in the way. The fourth thing is the action embedded in daily practices. You can't, a culture is created not just in big grandiose actions, but in everyday actions that individual people take. And that is, in staff meetings, in one-on-ones with your direct reports, if I'm an individual leader, my sphere of influence. Everybody has a sphere of influence. Even if you don't have direct reports as a manager, there are people that look to you because they respect you and they're your peers and
Mm.
they listen to what you say. So you can embed it into daily practices of what you do every single day, listening empathetically, understanding what the needs are if you're a manager of your individual employees, understand what's getting in the way of them being able to be their best and practicing those things. So not just for your employees and your team, but for those that are within earshot and eyeshot and are watching you, your management peers, your bosses that say he or she is doing something really interesting with their team. And they will ask you about it. And then you can start sort of this ripple effect. And then the fifth thing is accountability, right? We talk about ideas, we talk about different things. But if we don't hold ourselves accountable, and then we also don't look to others to say, I'm also going to hold you accountable for inclusive behaviors, for looking at this business practice and saying, how do we make sure that it includes um, all of our customer base, not just the select few?
Yeah.
And then the last thing is empowerment. So now you need to um, make sure that you are driving accountability, but you're also empowering others to be able to elevate their voice, to be able to look at the system, be aware of the system, to take action, tell you about it if you're a manager or a leader, give them a psychological safety so they can come to you and say, I think that this is something that we need to fix. And they don't feel apprehensive about coming to you and raising awareness to you. So those are like the things that you can do on an everyday basis, anyone at any level, to really make an impact.
Celeste, the truth about equity, we want everyone to go out and buy it.
Mhm.
Talk to us about where it's available. Where can people get hold of it?
Yeah, so the about equity is available. You can get it through a link on my website, which is at www.crwdiversity.com. And you can also get it on Amazon as well. And it's in select bookstores around the globe as well. But it is something that is near and dear to my heart. It was sort of therapy writing it because of the times we were in over the last year and a half.
Mm.
And I launched it at a time where people would have, people actually said to me, well, this is kind of a crazy time for you to be launching it. And I said, well, I'm launching it globally, not just in the United States, first of all. And what a better time to be launching in the United States where there is all of this anti-DE&I rhetoric and
Yeah.
all of this misinformation and strategic, purposeful disinformation as
Mm,
well about what it really is. And so for me, that was really, really important.
yeah. I couldn't agree more, Celeste, and I think it's coming just in time, and it's definitely also an act of defiancy and an act of um, disagreeing with the status quo that has gone backwards and not forwards. What do you feel leadership teams need to do next, Celeste? So, what is your sort of advice for top leadership teams that um, might know a lot of those things, but
Mhm.
haven't really been able to integrate all of this?
Yeah. So what's happening in a lot with a lot of leaders, especially if if they're global companies and they're based in the United States, but they're also global entities. I would say that leaders need to really make sure that they are doing a self-assessment. And what I mean by that is many leaders, and I've talked to many, many leaders across a lot of different industries, and they're at a stance where their company has kind of done a little bit of backtracking. They have either renamed it or eliminated some programs or initiatives, and employees are kind of looking at them as leaders to say, well, wait a minute, you were an advocate of diversity and inclusion
Mm,
before all of this happened, and now the company is sort of shifting a bit. They haven't gotten rid of it fully, but they're shifting, and they're looking at you for guidance as a leader and saying, what are you going to do? And so many leaders are kind of like, they were very, they're very inclusive leaders. They demonstrated inclusion, belonging in their day-to-day efforts and how they led. And now they're finding themselves at this sort of crossroad and inflection point.
yeah.
And my advice to them is you need to stay the path. You need to be your authentic self. You need to still demonstrate inclusive behaviors. You need to create an environment where people feel safe, where people have a sense of belonging, where they feel valued for what they contribute. That doesn't go away. That is something that's going to be important in any environment. You need to be that business leader that is saying, okay, how does this benefit our customers across all of our customers? Our customers are very diverse around the globe. How are we making sure that what we are putting out is going to meet their needs? And if it isn't, how are we putting strategies together to find out why it isn't? Going beyond the product and really looking at the customer base.
Mm,
You need to be that leader that is still staying the path, because this too shall pass. And when this does pass, your employees, your shareholders, the customer base, they're all going to be looking at you as a leader and saying, during those challenging times, what did you do? How
yeah.
did you demonstrate the type of leader you actually are? And that's when people look at you. They look at you during these challenging times. That's when the true essence of you as a leader comes out. And that's what they're looking at right now. And that's where you have to basically make sure that you're still demonstrating the fact that you want to be and are still a leader who wants everyone to feel valued, a sense of belonging, and felt dignity and respect.
Yeah, definitely. Celeste, so I think often we think or we forget about the younger generations, right? The younger generations that are coming into the sort of workplaces, they come and work for those companies, they start buying products, they start having buying power. What tips could we give to sort of university leavers, people in their first jobs, to give them hope that this is something that they should um, advocate for?
Yeah, the Generation Z, grew up in a time and are still growing in their formative young adult lives. They have a sense of purpose, a
Mm,
sense of value, more so than any generation before them.
before, yeah.
And So they are very much in tune with their beliefs, their perspectives, their values. I mean, look at the college campuses and the protests, and it's to me it's a beautiful thing that they feel empowered to be able to elevate their voices, their young voices. They seem to be more in tune with what's happening around them from a social and political and economic standpoint. Very mature beyond what I was when I was their age.
Definitely.
And so when they come into the workplace, and I talk with a lot of students at universities, especially those that are getting ready to transition into the workplace. And one of the things that I tell them is do your homework because you want to go to an organization, whether that be a for-profit, nonprofit, a startup, whatever it is, you want to make sure that they do have the same values that you do because you're going to be spending a lot of time there.
Yeah.
And then I talk about some of the ways that they do that. And then once you get in, don't try to assimilate. Be your authentic self. Because when you come in, if it's the right organization for you, they hired you for a reason. They hired you because of your skills, your capabilities, your characteristics, but also they saw something in you that was going to help them as an organization to grow and build. And so, your ideas, your reflections are extremely important because they're trying to understand this next generation that's coming into the workplace. You can help them to understand that. And by doing that, you can help them with their people strategies. You can help them with their business strategies and reaching that generation of customers. You can help them with so much. So don't go into an organization and think that you have to shy away and be quiet. You don't. Elevate your voice. Make sure that they understand what is important to you and speak on behalf of your generation because it's critically important in any organization.
Thank you for that. Celeste, and you've been working as a chief DAI officer. What are your main learnings in working with people and companies? And, you know, companies are made out of people.
Mhm. That's the main thing. Companies are not, Stephanie, they're not spreadsheets and laptops and iPads and machinery. They're made from people. And, yes, we know that artificial intelligence is here and there's more on the horizon, but they're the essence of AI is to enhance the human intelligence, right?
Yeah.
It's to augment the human intelligence. And so it's really, really a critical time. And my learnings were in order for me to make an impact and really disseminate and communicate and reach people, especially leaders and C-suites, I had to make sure that I was talking to them in a language that they would understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times people think that, well, if you're in a chief diversity officer role, you need to really be in tune with the people. Absolutely, you need to be in tune with the pulse of the employees, both internally and then also externally and what's going on. But you also have to have strong business acumen because you need to understand what keeps your leaders up at night and then say, what are those interventions from my discipline of diversity, equity, and inclusion that are going to help to solve problems that they're having.
Mm.
And so that is really, really important. And for me, one of my key learnings was making sure that I took and understood the business to be able to say diversity, equity, inclusion is not just morally right. It creates a competitive advantage for any organization because your organization is comprised of people who you need them at their optimal level of performance. You need them to have innovation and creativity and high intellectual fortitude. And in order for you to do that, you have to understand them. You have to meet them where they are. And I call those acts of equity, right?
Mm.
You have to meet them where they are and give them what they need to bring them to that culture of inclusion or that culture of collective purpose, which is the mission of the company. And so for me, that's really, really important. And something that I had to make sure that I quickly pivoted when I first got in the role, 11 years ago, because I was thinking from a very myopic perspective, from a diversity standpoint of how many women do we have in the organization, how many people of color, how many people with disabilities, et cetera. And that's a foundational element. You need a diverse workforce to really instill that creativity, but you also need to be looking at the systems, and you also need to be looking at the infrastructure and the business as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, what did you feel were the sort of major stumbling blocks or sort of trip ups for teams or companies to, you know, transform their organizations to be more inclusive?
You have to be open to having the bold conversations.
Mm,
And you don't have to go at it from the standpoint of pounding your fist on the desk. You want to be able to have a conversation and a dialogue with people from different points of view, different perspectives. Because if you can't do that and you can't facilitate that in your organization with your team, you can't have an inclusive environment.
yeah.
It isn't all rainbows and unicorns.
Mm,
It is tough conversations that you have to have, and you have to be able to listen empathetically. You have to be an active listener. You have to be able to have the conversation and speak your perspective in a way that treats everyone around the table with dignity and respect. At the end of the day, you can agree to disagree, but at least you've heard the perspectives, you understand the perspectives, and you can either integrate them into whatever practice or policy that you're discussing, but you've had the conversation and the dialogue, and that's critically important. Um, and sometimes, we try to shy away from having that conversation, and you just can't do that. You can't shy away from the conversation, otherwise you're doing a disservice to the work that you're trying to do, because inclusion doesn't come without its challenges. True inclusion, comes at the point of making sure that you understand the perspectives and the implication that it has on the people, on your culture, and on your business.
Celeste, I think dignity and respect, which is what this is based on, that's a fundamental human right, and we seem to forget that often. Celeste, so what does success look like for you?
Oh gosh, success looks like, I have to go back to the statement from the late Martin Luther King Jr., where, we can be judged by not just the color of our skin or what we look like in our identities, but we can be judged and valued for our character, for our skills, our capabilities, what we bring to the table, our perspectives. And the generation coming coming now, they are the most diverse from an identity standpoint that
Mm.
we have ever seen in the history of mankind and womankind. And so this this is going to play out in future years, where the world is going to be so diverse from an identity standpoint. And so we need to make sure that we are focusing on the systems, on the infrastructure, because we want to be able to create environments where everyone can succeed,
Mm.
given and they're given the resources that they need to succeed. And so, it's just extremely important that in the future, that success to me looks like everyone is able to achieve whatever it is that their aspirations are,
Yeah.
because we have the systems and the infrastructure that assumes that everyone is capable, instead of assuming that some people are and some people aren't, and not taking into account that people started from different starting places. They have different life experiences, different cultures, different identities, different skills, different capabilities. And so for me, success looks like that we've taken all of that into account and we've created systems and infrastructure and policies that really benefit everyone.
Mm.
That's, to me,
So
that's it.
well said, so well said, Celeste. And I sometimes think if we look at history and if we look at all the great things we've been doing in the, last centuries, how can we not push forward and make this more respectable and dignified for everybody? And we know that is the only direction to go.
Yes, yes.
So, what would you say are you most proud of to date?
Um, I am most proud of what I see and what I saw when I was in the chief diversity officer role of how diversity, equity, and inclusion is embraced on a global scale. When I first got into the role, it was pretty much looked at as, well, it's a US thing.
Mm,
It's not something that we really subscribe to. I talked with and worked with people across all of the continents, all of the regions, and they would kind of put their hand up and say, that's a US thing, Celeste. We don't have those problems here. And fast forward to 10 years later, where not only do they understand it, but what I would say is they have this a foundational just love of the fact that they see the diversity in their countries. They understand it from a historical perspective, how it's manifesting itself in the country now, and they're doing things about it, doing things to try to create those environments where everyone has a sense of value and they can achieve what they want to achieve. And yes, we're not there yet, but seeing it go from, this US sort of thing, concept, to globally being embraced is just wonderful. It's to me, the global aspect of it to me is so very powerful.
mm. So, talk to us about your plans and goals for this year and the next years.
Yeah, I want to continue building on this purpose that I have. I want to continue to have conversations with people about the importance of equity, the importance of diversity and inclusion, how it makes impact, being able to explain people so they don't look at it as this enigma wrapped up in a
Mm,
question mark, that they understand it from a very pragmatic standpoint, that they implement it, they go and they walk away and they're doing things in their daily lives to really create a more inclusive environment around them. Um, they're not necessarily having to have to be overwhelmed with boiling the ocean, but they just boil two or three people around you, and that'll have a ripple effect on the ocean. But I just want to be able to do that. I want to make sure that people um, are able to reach me and talk to me and have the conversations. I love engaging with people and having the conversations. I am hoping that people will read the book and have a better understanding of how everyone does win when we get equity right and people understand it. Um, and so those are just some of the things. I'm going to continue the consulting and talking with people and helping people across a multitude of different industries. I want to continue to speak to people like this, the podcast, and talking with folks like yourself and your audiences, and helping to spread the word around the importance of equity. It's just really, really important to me. And it goes beyond, someone said, well, that's your brand. I said, no, it's not a brand, because brand to me seems superficial. It's my
mm,
purpose. It's my
yes.
calling, and
Yeah.
it's not a job. It's a calling. I've
Yeah.
chosen this. This is something that is important to me, and I want to make sure that people understand it so they can be empowered to do what it is that they have been called to do.
Celeste, so what takeaways would you like our listeners to have from your story if you had to sum it up?
Yeah, I think for me, it's Equity is not something that is hard to understand. Diversity is simply differences in people, those you can see and those you can't see. Inclusion, we want to surround them with a culture of inclusion so we can leverage the diversity that exists among the people. And equity is simply those actions that we have to put in place for each individual person, because they're so different, to get them to that collective purpose. But that's what I want people to understand very simply.
Celeste, I'm so grateful for you, for the work that you do, for the book that you wrote, The Truth About Equity. Everyone look up crwdiversity.com. Who are you leaving behind? That gives you a clue as to what you need to change, because this equity and inclusion is everybody's job. Thank you.
Thank you.